We have done the observational method yesterday, right? Now we're going to start with the second method, which is known as experimental method. Page number 29. All of you, please take out your book, open page number 29. Just keep the topic in front of you so that it will be easy for you to refer in between, right? So now we are going to start the second method of inquiry in psychology. And what is that? Experimental method, right? As name is suggesting, experimental method, what is it all about? Doing experiments. Fine. Now you have to keep in your mind 2-3 things very important. Either write it somewhere or just underline in your book itself. Whenever we're going to explain about experimental method, 2 to 3 things are very important. First of all, this method generally conducted to establish cause and effect relationship between two variables in a controlled setting. Now I'm going to explain you what is cause, what is effect. We'll also discuss about what is the exact meaning of variable and what are the controlled settings. First of all, just get to know about the definition. Experimental method is what? It is generally establish the cause and effect relationship between two or more variables, and that is in a controlled situation, right? After that, let me be very clear what is cause. Cause is the event being changed or manipulated. I hope you remember independent variable. Yes, we have done this topic earlier also. So if you can relate to the things, independent variable is known as cause, and it is the variable which is being changed or manipulated. Manipulated means certain changes, certain modifications are introduced. What is effect? Effect is the behavior that changes because of this manipulation. Which manipulation? Which we have done in independent variable, right? So because of that change or because of that manipulation, certain behavior changes. That is known as what? Effect, you can say, or you can use the another word. What is that? Dependent variable, right? So write it somewhere. Independent variable is the cause and dependent variable is the effect. Cause is the event being changed or manipulated, and effect is the behavior that changes because of the manipulation, right? Up to here, all is clear. Now we come upon the concept of variable, right? What is variable? Variable, you all know some things which vary, right? So things which vary means variable, we can either say that it could be a stimulus, it could be any event or any stimulus which is varies, right? Or which can also be measured. Now let me be very clear again that any object is not a variable in itself. Fine. The features or characteristics of that object is variable. Now let me take one example to explain you. If I say a pen, right? So pen will not be variable, but the features of that pen could be variable. Now what could be the feature? The size of the pen, the shape of the pen, the color of the pen, the material of the pen, right? So the features and the characteristics of any object are variables. The object is itself is not a variable. Got it? Variable is what? Any stimulus or any event that varies, that keeps on changing. And at the same time, it can be measured also. Fine. So this is all about variable, right? Now there are 3 types of variables. Basically, there are 3 types of variables. To start with the first one, independent variable. I have just explained you independent variable is also known as cause. It is that variable which is manipulated or altered or its strength varied by the researcher in the experiment. Fine. What is independent variable? It is the cause of anything. And changes are also introduced into this variable only by the researcher, right? What is dependent variable? Dependent variable is the effect. Fine. Variables on which the effect of independent variable is observed, it is called dependent variable, and it is also called the effect. Fine. IV is cause and dependent variable is effect. Now the third type of variables, which are also known as extraneous variable. Write it somewhere. It is also given on page number 30. The third type of variable is what? Extraneous variables. The other name of extraneous variables are relevant variables. What is the other name? Relevant variables. Why it is called relevant variables? Because in any experiment, in any study, if we are taking a particular IV and we are taking a particular DV, right? Independent variable and dependent variable. But along with these two variables, try to understand, children, along with these two variables, other variables are also operating, are also active in the environment, right? We cannot study each and every variable. Fine, it is not possible. And we have to be very specific and selective in our study, in our experiment. So we have chosen IV and DV. But apart from these variables, what is happening in the environment? The other extraneous variables are also active. And it is also known as relevant because these variables can also affect your study. Why it is called relevant? Because these have some relevance. What relevance? That they can also affect your result. But in case you want to be accurate, precise with your result, what you have to do as a researcher, you have to control these extraneous variables. You have to control these relevant variables. We'll discuss several techniques to control these types of variable later. But for right now, just understand three types of variables. Got it? First of all, the definition of variable. Clear? Give the example of pen. That object is not a variable, but its features and characteristics are variable. Then explain IV, explain DV with an example that could be better. Then come upon extraneous variables. That these variables influence the independent and dependent variable, but the researcher may not be interested in examining their effects. So what he will do? He will control these extraneous variables in some manner. And keep in mind that IV and DP are interdependent, right? One cannot take place without the other. So independent variable and dependent variable are what? Interdependent. That is dependent on each other. Let me give one very simple example to again make you explain IV and DV. Suppose I say teacher's method of teaching. Fine. A teacher's method of teaching. And second thing is students' performance. Or you can say students' achievement. So in this case, which one is independent variable and which one is dependent variable? Just try to answer yourself, as I'm not unmuting you people. I'm not asking the answers from your side. Just make it clear in your mind only that teacher's method of teaching is what? IV or DV? What is it? It is IV, independent variable, right? And students' achievement, what is it? IV or DV? Obviously, DV, dependent variable. Now, what is the cause? Teacher's method of teaching. What will be the effect? Students' achievement, right? If I introduce some changes in teacher's method of teaching, there will be an effect of this method of teaching on students' achievement. Are you getting? Yes. So in this case, independent variable is affecting dependent variable, right? And dependent variable is what? The effect of IV. The changes which we have introduced in IV dependent variable is what? It is the effect of those changes. It is the result of those changes. Now got it? Fine. So this is all about the variables. Now let us come upon the second important part of experimental method, experimental and control groups. Now I think, explained this experiment quite a lot times, and I have asked you people to note down certain things while explaining this experiment, because this is quite conceptual. You have to, got all your concepts first of all clear before getting into this. So if dependent variable, independent variable, variables are clear, please give it a reading today itself, because I don't think I'll be explaining this thing again. Fine. So experimental and control groups, there are two kind of groups. One is experimental group and the second one is control group. What is experimental group? An experimental group is what? In which members of the group are exposed to independent variable manipulation, right? Experimental group में क्या हो रहा है? जो members हैं group के, those are exposed to independent variable manipulation, right? So independent variable manipulation किसके साथ में हो रहा है? The members of experimental group. And what is now control group? The other name is control group. That is also known as comparison group. So that is treated in every way like the experimental group, except that the manipulated variables are absent in it. Getting my point? Two types of groups are there. Experimental group and other one is what? Control group. Experimental group में क्या हो रहा है? Members are exposed to IV manipulation, independent variable manipulation. और control group में क्या होगा? Opposite होगा. This independent variable manipulation is absent in control group. तभी तो comparison possible होगा. I told you one thing, that there could be no comparison between the similar things, right? Comparison would be possible only if there are certain differences, right? So how these two groups are different from each other? Experimental group, please write somewhere that IV manipulation is present in experimental group, whereas IV manipulation is absent in control group. The other name of control group is what? Comparison group, because a comparison is always made between these two types of groups to get the accurate result. Fine. Now let us come upon the famous experiment done by whom? The name of the psychologists are what? Latney and Darley. These are the initials. The psychologists Latney and Darley have done a very famous experiment in which what they have done, they have taken two experimental groups and one control group. Keep on writing somewhere so that you can refer afterwards and you will be getting the things easier, right? So the psychologists have done the experiment in which they have taken what? Two experimental groups and one control group. Fine. Now what was the experiment? The participants in the study were sent to three types of rooms, right? There were three types of rooms and participants were divided among those groups. In one room, no one was present. Write in a bracket, control group. A room where no one was present apart from the group members, right? In one room, no one was present. That is what? Control group. And in other two rooms, two persons were already seated. And what was that? Experimental groups. Fine. Altogether, three groups were there, right? Two experimental groups, one control group. 3 rooms were available there. So in one room, no one was present. So that was control group. And in other 2 rooms, already 2 people were sitting. So those were what? Experimental group. Those 2 experimental groups. Fine. Now, how it proceeds? Of the 2 experimental groups, one group was instructed not to do anything when smoke filled in the room, right? There was a small enclosure in each room and smoke was passed from there. It was done intentionally. So what were the instructions before the smoke was allowed to get inside the room? One group out of the experimental group, 2 groups were there, experimental groups, right? So one group was instructed not to do anything when smoke filled in the room. And the other group was not given any instructions. आ रहा है समझ में? 2 experimental group में से एक experimental group को क्या बोला गया कि you don't have to take any action, just sit quiet. So this was the kind of instruction only. Whenever you people make noise, I always ask in the class not to make noise. So in the same manner, the experimenter has asked the group members not to do anything. So this was the kind of instruction given to one experimental group. Fine. और दूसरा experimental group था, उसको क्या बोला गया? उसको कुछ भी नहीं बोला गया. No instruction was given. Nothing. Fine. Now, after the experimental manipulation had occurred, the performance of the control group measured in terms of reporting of smoke. Fine. कैसे measure करेंगे उनकी performance को? All the group members have to report about the about the smoke, right? So they have to inform about the smoke that was filling inside their room. Now start writing what is independent variable in this experiment. Presence of others, right? Presence of others means those 2 people who already were sitting in the room. So independent variable will what? Presence of others. Dependent variable क्या होगा? Reporting of smoke. The persons obviously will report about the smoke. It is very general. It is human nature that whenever some emergency, whenever some problem comes, all of a sudden we just rush towards help. We rush toward informing the concerned person. It is very obvious. So dependent variable will what? Reporting of that smoke. Fine. Now, what were the results? It was found that the control group participants reported in maximum numbers about the emergency. Keep on writing the results. सबसे ज़्यादा reporting किसने करी? Control group ने. कौन सा था control group? जिसमें कोई भी present नहीं था. No 2 persons were already seated there, right? So maximum reporting किसके द्वारा करी गई? Who has done? The control group members that see smoke has started filling, do something. They just rush on to inform someone. Fine. Second number पे कौन सा group था? Experimental group जिसमें 2 persons were present. ये तो याद है? तो maximum reporting किसने करी? Control group participants ने, right? Now it was followed by the first experimental group members where the participants were not given any instructions. फिर second number पे किसने reporting करी? वो experimental group जहाँ पे किसी भी तरह का instruction नहीं दिया गया था. याद है? Remember, no instruction was given one of the experimental group. So second number पे कौन सा था? Experimental group number 1. Fine. और सबसे least reporting किसने करी? The second experimental group consisting of confederates reported the emergency situation the least. जिसमें क्या कहा गया था? Was given the instruction not to do anything. इस वाले ग्रुप ने सबसे कम रिपोर्टिंग करी. The second experimental group जिसमें कहा गया था कि you don't have to do anything, This was a kind of instruction given, right? So least number of reporting done by second experimental group, जिसमें क्या instruction दिया गया था? Not to do anything. Got it? This was all about this famous experiment. You have to read this experiment once, twice, depends upon you. Write down the basic things, the basic terms which will be needed whenever you go through this experiment. And after understanding this experiment, you can say that you have understood the experimental method. Experimental method is all about the experimental groups, about the control groups, about the independent, dependent, and extraneous variables. If you have understood this experiment, that simply shows that you have understood the basic concepts of the second method, which is known as experimental method. Fine. Now let us come upon the other term which is given in your book, randomly. We use this word often, but why they have used this word here? What is the relevance? The distribution of participants to experimental and control groups was done randomly. Randomly means that it is a kind of method which ensures that each person has an equal chance of being included in any of the groups. Fine. Suppose 15 students are there in my class, and I want to select all of out of them, some members, some students I want in experimental groups, and some students I want in control group. But how I can assign? I cannot name particularly, or I should not have any setup in my mind, any mental map in my mind that these students I want to have in experimental groups and these students I want to have in control group. It should not be like this. It should be a random assignment. Suppose I have given the example, out of 15-16 students, I just either choose odd selection or an even selection, right? If I'm selecting 1, 3, 5, 7th number of students in my experimental group and rest of the children, those who are left in the control group. So that will be a random assignment. I'm following that odd sequence, or I'm following that even sequence, right? Or I'm not following any sequence, I'm just selecting that you in experimental, you in control group, you in experimental group, that person, the last one will be in control group. So in that manner, I can select the students into two groups. So that will be what? Random assignment. And what this method is ensuring? Equal chance of everyone to get included into the experiment, irrespective of their personal or psychological characteristics. Fine. So why we have used this word random assignment or randomly? It is a method which ensures that each person has an equal chance of getting included in any of the groups, right? Now all relevant variables means the extraneous variables in experimental studies might influence the dependent variable. Yes, they can influence the dependent variable. So what is the need? There is a need to control all of them. Fine. So there are three major types of these relevant variables. Let us just first discuss what are the three major types. First is organismic variables. जब हम extraneous और relevant variables की बात करते हैं, तो there are three major types. Let us discuss the first one, organismic variables. What are organismic variables? We can say the psychological characteristics, whether it is related to anxiety, intelligence, interest, personality, etc. These are what? Organismic variables. Fine. The second one is what? Situational or environmental variables. The variables which are related to your surroundings, to your environment, or to your situations. It could be related to noise coming from outside, the temperature, the humidity of that day, right? The third type of variable is what? Sequential variables. That it could be related to any kind of sequence. There could be various kind of sequences. So the third one is related to sequential variables. So these are three major types of relevant variables. What are they? First one is organismic variable. The second one is situational variables. And the third one is again starting from S, sequential variables, right? Now let us also discuss the techniques to control these relevant or extraneous variables. The first technique is to eliminate them from the experimental setting completely. There are some extraneous variables, there are some relevant variables. What is the technique? How can we control it? The first one is to eliminate those variables completely from that situation. As they have given the example, suppose in a laboratory we are conducting an experiment and some unwanted noise is coming from outside. So what we can opt for a soundproof room. As we have auditoriums, that those are what? Soundproof rooms, soundproof halls. So we can go for that so that no noise coming from outside will disturb or will influence our study. Fine. The first one is what? To eliminate, or you can write elimination. The second one is that elimination is always not possible. Fine. As in this case, if sound those sound constant. Now, what does it mean if I say keep that relevant variable constant? That means that ensure that that sound goes continuously throughout the experiment, right? If experiment is suppose is for half an hour, fine. So ensure that that sound, that unwanted sound or noise is continuously coming from that half an hour. So what will be the thing? That yes, all the members of experimental as well as control group are affected by that sound equally. Fine. And during the full process, full duration. The second one is what? To hold them constant, all those relevant variables throughout the experiment. Third one is what? In some kind matching is done. What we mean by matching? Like for controlling organismic and background variables, matching is also used. In this procedure, the relevant variables in the two groups are equated or are held constant by taking matched pairs across conditions of the experiment. See, as they are saying, matching means that the members of the two groups should be similar in some manner. Matching is only then possible, right, when some similarity is there. Suppose I am taking students from urban background. So I will take the students from urban background in all the groups. I will not go for students coming from rural background in control group, or I'm not going to take students from urban background in experimental, right? So matching should be there, same background, same economic condition, if that experiment is allowing you, right? So you can do the matching wherever it is required. The third one is matching. Now what is the fourth one? Counterbalancing technique. What does it mean? Can you take out some meaning out of it? Counterbalancing technique. In this, you are doing an experiment in a particular manner, then just do the thing in a reverse order. Right? Counterbalance it, do the opposite. Suppose half of the group may receive the task in the order of A and B, fine, while the other half in order of B and A. पहले group को कैसे दिया sequence from A to B. This is the pattern. And other half of the groups, I'll give the questions in B to A form, that is backward. एक होता है 1 to 10, right? And the another is 10 to 1. So एक को मैं दे रही हूँ 1 to 10 के अंदर questions, and other group I'm giving the question in the backward manner from 10 to 1, backward counting, right? Or the same individual may be given the task in A, B, B, A order. या तो I will divide the group into two equal halves, or I will give all the members of the group the task in which order? A, B, B, A. Fine. So this is all about counterbalancing technique. The last one is random assignment. Random assignment we have just discussed, that only you have to write that what is the meaning of random assignment, what is the motive behind using this method to ensure that equal chance is getting for every individual to include it into the study. Fine, children. So this is all about experimental method. Now let us just briefly discuss the advantages and disadvantages of experimental method, as we are discussing for each and every method here. So the strength of a well-designed experiment is what? That it is conducted in highly controlled laboratory situations, right? When we are applying controlled situations, so the chance, the probability of getting accurate results increases automatically. Fine. The experiment produce results that do not generalize well, or we can say it does not apply to real situation. What is the disadvantage? Advantage to kya hai ki it is done in controlled laboratory situation. Fine. So chances of getting precise result increases. But what is the disadvantage on the other side? That we cannot, apply the results to the general population to an accurate level. Real life situation में laboratory की जो results आ रहे हैं उनको apply करना थोड़ा difficult होता है या इतना possible नहीं हो पाता. Fine, we cannot generalize those results well to the general real life population, right? Second thing, they have low external validity. External validity means the same, that we cannot apply the results to the real situation. So it is not valid for external world. We are getting results in laboratory, but we cannot generalize or we cannot apply it to the real situation. In the other word, you can use they have low external validity. Fine. Another limitation, that it is not always feasible to study a particular problem experiment. It is very obvious. It is never possible with human behavior that each and every type of problem can be studied in laboratory situation or in a controlled situation. As I have given the example, suppose a mother has lost her child, or we want to test, the intelligence level of children and the nutritional deficiency, right? These two are the variables, whether nutritional content affect somebody's intelligence or not. So what we have to do, we have to take one group, which we will to that group we will give a proper balanced nutritional diet, and to the other group what we will do, we will not give those people food. So this is very inhuman, this is unethical to starve someone or to keep anyone hungry for long periods of time just for your study. So these things are not at all possible whenever human or animals are there, So this is also a limitation, that it is not feasible to study a particular problem experimentally every time. The third problem is that it is difficult to know and control all the relevant variables. As we have discussed about the control variables just now, so it is also a thing that it is not always possible to know first of all and then control all the relevant variables at the same time. So these are what general limitations of experimental study. I hope you have understood today's lecture. Quite important one. This method is really important. Ma'am, please stop with the recording.